The night the Marigold slid back into our harbor, the tide held its breath. No horn, no radio call, just a silent hull gliding over black water as if pulled by a thread. The blue paint looked the same as the day she vanished. Our lighthouse swept its beam and caught a dent along the starboard rail. I knew that dent. I made it when I was 10, scraping my bike against the ship to impress my father. He was first mate on the Marigold in April 2005, the night the fog swallowed 32 people without a scream. At first they called it an accident, then a tragedy, then a mystery when the search planes found nothing. Our town held funerals with empty coffins. My mother folded my father's jacket into a box and slid it under her bed. I learned to live around a missing piece, like walking with a pebble in your shoe you never take off. 20 years later, the sea returned the ship, and none of the men. She drifted to her old berth, slowed, and bumped the worn tires along the piling. Ropes lay coiled neatly. The harbor master shouted for the Coast Guard. My mother pressed her hands to the rail and whispered my father's name. They kept everyone back until morning. I stayed anyway, leaning against the cold iron. When officials finally boarded, they let me come because I was family liaison. I stepped onto the deck and felt a steady heartbeat under my feet. The smell was rope and iron and something sharp. Below deck, bunks were made. The galley held cups stacked beside a kettle. A deck of cards lay in the mess where a game had paused mid-hand. The Queen of Hearts faced up. My finger came away dusty, not damp. No fish scales, no mold, no barnacles along the waterline. It felt wrong and clean. In the chart room, the logbook lay open to the 6th of April 2005, the last entry in my father's hand. Dense fog, unstable compass. Light west by south that does not match our maps. Proceeding to render aid. On the bridge, the clock above the wheel was stuck at 21:17. The watches we found in lockers matched it. The GPS blinked a string of coordinates that drew a path off the chart, a line that stepped past the last printed soundings and stopped where the paper turned white. By afternoon, reporters planted tripods on the pier. Scientists set up antennas that spun and blinked. Fishermen talked in small knots and used older words, the white seam, the place where water is too smooth, the line old captains warned us not to cross. The mayor kept saying historic. My mother stood by the empty wheel and traced the dent in the rail with 2 fingers and said, very softly, "He'll be cold." I asked to stay aboard that night. Captain Ruiz, the woman in charge, said I could if I didn't touch anything. I promised I wouldn't. Near midnight, while the harbor lay quiet and the fog thickened into a pale wall beyond the breakwater, I heard footsteps above me. Slow, even. A sailor's rhythm. I climbed to the bridge. Through the glass, the harbor lights were smudges, but beyond them, a faint glow beat to the west. 1, 2, 3, pause. Not our lighthouse. Ours swept a constant circle. This one pulsed like a living thing. The compass needle trembled and leaned toward that glow, straining north like a dog at the end of a leash. 3 soft notes rose and faded the tune my father whistled when he tightened a knot. That sound did not belong to wind or rigging or wishful thinking. It fit inside my chest like memory and made room there. I set my hand on the wheel. The ship answered with a tiny swing, eager, like a horse that knows the trail home. The dead clock gave a twitch of the second hand. I jerked my hand back and stood still until the glow slipped into the fog and the tune faded. Only then did I see a folded scrap on the chart table, wedged under a brass divider, the edges soft from fingers. 2 words in my father's hand. Hold the line. In the morning, I showed Captain Ruiz the note. She called her team. They sealed the bridge, checked engines, and tied instruments along the rail. When the sun slid down and the fog came with evening like it always does, Ruiz gave a short nod. "We take her out at first light," she said. "We follow that pulse. We watch, we record, and we come back." We crossed the bar with dawn. The cutter held our flank. A science boat trailed our wake. The ocean lay flat, then lifted in a long breath. The pulse led us west. The farther we went, the stranger the water looked glassy as oil, but leaving no smear. The air grew bright without the sun growing stronger, like stepping into a pale afterglow. The GPS froze on numbers that meant nothing. Radios hissed. The compass pointed away from north toward the glow, like it had been taught a new rule. Fog opened in a long white mouth and showed us a lane of water straight as a plumb line, bright as new steel, running from horizon to horizon. At its lip floated a life ring stamped with our ship's name, and inside the ring a photograph sealed in plastic my parents on their wedding day, smiling like they knew the joke, and we didn't. The pulse came from inside the lane. It skittered along my skin. We drifted, held by a pull I couldn't see. Shapes moved beyond the bright line, a reflection that wasn't one. Men on a deck so close to ours it hurt to look. A captain raising a hand. A boy on a bicycle, knocking a rail and leaving a dent. Time felt thin. The dead clock ticked once. Then again, the hand slid to 21:18, tiny and brave. He was there. My father stood on the other side of the bright lane, only a breath older than the night he vanished. He was real. He lifted our two-finger signal that meant wait. I wanted to jump through. He shook his head and pointed past me. Behind him, a small boat with a snapped mast pitched on the bright water, a child clutching the gunwale. The kid's face was all fear and stubbornness. The crew of the other Marigold threw a line. The rope vanished as it crossed the lane and showed up again in our world like a trick. My father's mouth formed the words from the note. Hold the line. I understood. The ship hadn't wandered back by accident. She had gone where time thins to do what ships do, answer a call. She had waited where doors open and close until both sides matched. If we dragged her away before the child crossed, we would pull the line from his hands and let him slip into a place with no maps. Maintain position, I said. Ruiz looked at me, at the boy, at the trembling rope that ran through two worlds. She nodded. The hull thrummed. The pulse climbed through the deck and into our arms. The boy moved hand over hand, slow and shaking, mouth working like he was arguing with the sea. My father leaned back with his weight on the far end and set his boots. I mirrored him, anchor to anchor. The clocks on both bridges began to tick together, twins across two decks. When the boy reached the lane, his fingers vanished, then his wrists. He kept moving even when he could not see what he held. He stepped onto our deck and collapsed, crying the way children cry when the brave finally runs out. For a breath, I believed I could pull my father the same way. He lifted his hand instead. Goodbye, then. Not forever. A goodbye with room for the next hello. I let go of the rope. The bright lane folded like silk. Fog closed in. The pulse went quiet. The water around us was gray again. The clock stopped at 21:17. The compass drifted north. Ruiz exhaled, long. The boy hiccuped into a blanket and told us his name was Eli. He said a blue ship had found him after the storm tore his sail. A man with kind eyes told him to climb and not look down, promised to hold the door. He described my father's jacket, the frayed cuffs, the coffee stain on the left lapel. He hummed 3 notes with a pause. 1, 2, 3, wait. We brought Eli home. His mother ran down the pier and dropped to her knees on the planks. Our town made food he would not eat. The scientists argued over numbers and odd hums they had recorded. They had no word that didn't sound like a story. Days passed. People kept stopping to touch the Marigold's rail. Some nights the harbor was quiet. Some nights the buoys chimed. 1, 2, 3, pause. On those nights, the air around the ship warmed like breath on winter glass. A week later, I found the chart room door unlatched, though I remembered locking it. On the table lay a short pencil line across yesterday's chart, our route from harbor to the bright lane and back again. At the end, the graphite had pressed hard enough to dent the paper. Our berth, our pier. Beneath it, in my father's hand, sat 3 words I read until the letters blurred. Door held. Under that, smaller, almost like a smile in writing, see you when the tide is right. I tucked the Queen of Hearts under the glass of the bridge clock. The second hand rested on it. The compass glowed dull. My mother took my father's jacket from the box and hung it by the door. Sometimes she touches the cuff with 2 fingers and lets her hand fall. Sometimes she laughs at nothing, the sound you make when a promise keeps you company. People ask if the ship truly reappeared after 20 years. I say yes, and I tell them the stranger thing. When she came home, she was still at work. She crossed a seam, kept a promise, and came back to tie off the loose end here. We were part of it too. We held the line long enough for a boy to step out of a storm that did not belong to our night. I wait now the way you wait for the tide, trusting a rule larger than plans. If the pulse comes again, I will be ready. I do not expect a clean ending. The sea hates straight edges and loves to fold time like cloth. If you stand where a ship vanished and returned with a warm deck and a stubborn clock, you will feel it too, the small tug under the ribs, the simple instruction from a voice you love. Hold the line. I keep the Queen of Hearts under the glass and the jacket by the door. When the fog turns bright and the water stills, I listen. If the pulse returns, I will answer.